of being with the McKelveys. "Good old Charlie would like Paul and Verge Gunch better than some highfalutin Willie boy," he insisted, but Mrs. Babbitt interrupted his observation with, "Yes, perhaps. I think I'll try to get some Lynnhaven oysters," and when she was quite ready she invited Dr. J. T. Angus, the oculist, and a dismally respectable lawyer named Maxwell, with their glittering wives. Neither Agnes nor Maxwell belonged to the Elks or the Athletic Club. Neither of them had ever called Babbitt brother, or asked his opinions on carburetors. The only human people they invited, Babbitt raged, were the Littlefields, and Howard Littlefield's at times became so statistical that Babbitt longed for the refreshment of Gunch's "Well, old lemon pie face, what's the good word?" Immediately after lunch Mrs. Babbitt began to set the table for the 7:30 dinner to the McKelveys, and Babbitt was, by order, home at 4. But they didn't find anything for him to do, and 3 times Mrs. Babbitt scolded, "Do please try to keep out of the way." He stood in the door of the garage, his lips drooping, and wished that Littlefield or Sam Doppelbrau or somebody would come along and talk to him. He saw Ted sneaking around the corner of the house. "What's the matter, old man?" said Babbitt. "Is that you, thin old one? Gee, Ma certainly is on the warpath. I told her Ro and I would just soon not be let in on the fiesta tonight, and she bit me. She says I got to take a bath, too. But say, the Babbitt men will be some lookers tonight. Little Theodore in a dress suit." The Babbitt men! Babbitt liked the sound of it. He put his arm about the boy's shoulder. He wished that Paul Riesling had a daughter, so that Ted might marry her. "Yes, your mother is kind of trouncing around, all right," he said, and they laughed together and sighed together and dutifully went in to dress. The McKelveys were less than 15 minutes late. Babbitt hoped that the Doppelbraus would see the McKelveys' limousine and their uniformed chauffeur waiting in front. The dinner was well cooked and incredibly plentiful, and Mrs. Babbitt had brought out her grandmother's silver candlesticks. Babbitt worked hard. He was good. He told none of the jokes he wanted to tell. He listened to the others. He started Maxwell off with a resounding, "Let's hear about your trip to Yellowstone." He was laudatory, extremely laudatory. He found opportunities to remark that Dr. Agnes was a benefactor to humanity, Maxwell and Howard Littlefield profound scholars, Charles McKelvey an inspiration to ambitious youth, and Mrs. McKelvey an adornment to the social circles of Zenith, Washington, New York, Paris, and numbers of other places. But he could not stir them. It was a dinner without a soul, for no reason that was clear to Babbitt. Heaviness was over them, and they spoke laboriously and unwillingly. He concentrated on Lucille McKelvey, carefully not looking at her blanched, lovely shoulder and the tawny silken band which supported her frock. "I suppose you'll be going to Europe pretty soon, won't you?" he invited. "I'd like awfully to run over to Rome for a few weeks." "I suppose you see a lot of pictures and music and curios and everything there."
"No, what I really go for is there's a little trattoria on the Villa della Scrofa where you get the best fettuccine in the world."
"Oh, yes, that must be nice to try that, yes." At 9:45 McKelvey discovered with profound regret that his wife had a headache. He said blithely, as Babbitt helped him with his coat, "We must lunch together sometime and talk over the old days." When the others had labored out at 10:30, Babbitt turned to his wife, pleading, "Charlie said he had a corking good time, and we must lunch. Said they wanted to have us up to their house for dinner before long." She achieved,
"Oh, it's been one of those quiet evenings that are often so much more enjoyable than noisy parties, where everybody talks at once and doesn't really settle down to nice quiet enjoyment."
But from the cot on the sleeping porch he heard her weeping slowly, without hope. 4. For a month they watched the social columns and waited for a return dinner invitation. As the hosts of Sir Gerald Doak, the McKelveys were headlined all the week after the Babbitts' dinner. Zenith ardently received Sir Gerald, who had come to America to buy coal. The newspapers interviewed him on prohibition, Ireland, unemployment, naval aviation,
The rate of exchange, tea drinking versus whiskey drinking, and psychology of American women and daily life as lived by English country families. Sir Gerald seemed to have heard of all these topics. The McKelveys gave him a Singhalese dinner, and Miss Eleanora Pearl Bates, society editor for the Advocate-Times, rose to her highest lark note. Babbitt read aloud at breakfast table.
"'Twixt the original and Oriental decorations, the strange and delicious food, and the personalities both of the distinguished guest and the charming hostess and the noted host, never has Zenith seen a more recherché affair than the Ceylon dinner dance given last evening by Mr. and Mrs. Charles McKelvey to Sir Gerald Doak. Methought, as we fortunate one were privileged to view that fairy and foreign scene, nothing at Monte Carlo or the choicest ambassadorial sets of foreign capitals could be more lovely. It is not for nothing that Zenith is in matters social rapidly becoming known as the choosiest inland city in the country. Though he is too modest to admit it, Lord Doak gives a cachet to our smart quarter such as it has not received since the ever memorable visit of the Earl of Sittingbourne. Not only is he the British peerage, but he is also on dit a leader of the British metal industries, as he comes from Nottingham, a favorite haunt of Robin Hood, though now we are informed by Lord Doak a live modern city of 275,573 inhabitants, and important lace as well as other industries. We like to think that perhaps through his veins runs some of the blood, both virile red and boomy blue, of the earlier lord of the good greenwood, the roguish Robin. The lovely Mrs. McKelvey never was more fascinating than last evening, in her black net gown, relieved by dainty bands of silver, and at her exquisite waist a glowing cluster of Aaron Ward roses. Babbitt said bravely, "Hope they don't invite us to meet this Lord Doak guy. Darn sight rather just have a nice quiet little dinner with Charlie and the missus."
At the Zenith Athletic Club they discussed it amply.
"I suppose we'll have to call McKelvey Lord Chaz from now on," said Sidney Finkelstein.
"It beats all get out," meditated that man of data, Howard Littlefield. "How hard it is for some people to get things straight. Here they call this fellow Lord Doak, when it ought to be Sir Gerald." Babbitt marveled.
"Is that a fact? Well, Sir Gerald, eh? That's what you call him, huh? Well, sir, I'm glad to know that."
Later he informed his salesman,
"It's funner than a goat the way some folks that just because they happen to lay up a big wad go entertaining famous foreigners don't have any more idea than a rabbit how to address 'em so to make 'em feel at home."
That evening, as he was driving home, he passed McKelvey's limousine and saw Sir Gerald, a large, ruddy, pop-eyed, Teutonic Englishman, whose dribble of yellow mustache gave him an aspect sad and doubtful. Babbitt drove on slowly, oppressed by futility. He had a sudden, unexplained, and horrible conviction that the McKelveys were laughing at him. He betrayed his depression by the violence with which he informed his wife,
"Folks that really tend to business haven't got the time to waste on a bunch like the McKelveys. This society stuff is like any other hobby. If you devote yourself to it, you get in. But I like to have a chance to visit with you and the children instead of all this idiotic chasing around."
They did not speak of the McKelveys again. 5. It was a shame at this worried time to have to think about the Overbrooks. Ed Overbrook was a classmate of Babbitt who had been a failure. He had a large family and a feeble insurance business out in the suburb of Dorchester. He was gray and thin and unimportant. He had always been gray and thin and unimportant. He was a person whom, in any group, he forgot to introduce, then introduced with extra enthusiasm. He had admired Babbitt's good fellowship in college, had admired ever since his power in real estate, his beautiful house and wonderful clothes. It pleased Babbitt, though it bothered him, with a sense of responsibility. At the class dinner he had seen poor Overbrook, in a shiny blue serge business suit, being diffident in a corner with three other failures.